Oh, hello. Welcome once again to Denton's Tales, where I try to combine information and entertainment. Yes, I mean, why not make mythology and history the opposite of boring old university lectures? I will now discourse at extreme length on the subject of Sumerian clay tablets. Do try to stay awake until the end. The lecture is only 3 hours long, but admittedly a bit dry, like a clay tablet. Yes. Now, I was an actor long before my hair was this color, of course, and I do like to revert now and then. Yes, I always enjoy a good revert and go back to how I told tales in times long past. I was very theatrical in those halcyon days when I trod the boards, and I trod them very well, even if I do say so myself, which I do frequently. Yeah, but I say it so well, don't I? You see. Now this time a goddess, but not a Norse one. No Old Norse connections at all, unlike most of my videos. Pagan, yes, but I suppose it's self-evident, really, isn't it? Since non-pagan religions don't have goddesses, do they? But of interest, I'm sure, to those interested in paganism in general, and one I talked about some years ago, so now I'm going to talk about her again, as I would have when I trod the boards, you see. Most people probably know of goddesses of the ancient world, such as Athena, Isis, Astarte, the queen of the stars, or the cat goddess Bast, and the Norse female gods of Osgata are pretty well known, I suppose. Freya, Frigg, Skadi, Idun, or Hel, or at least the names may be familiar, even if not anything really very much is actually known about them. But I wouldn't think not many people would recognize the name LASA. No, yes, you say, of course, I recognize you. That's an easy one. It's the capital of Tibet. Yes, well, you see, just because something sounds the same, Ducky, doesn't mean it is. It's all in the spelling, you see. Yes, the spelling. Lhasa, spelled L-H-A-S-A. Well, indeed, that is the capital of Tibet. Yes, you got that one right. But Lhasa, spelled L-A-S-A, but with the same pronunciation, of course, is, or, well, rather was, a goddess. Oh, never heard of it, says you. And, well, you wouldn't be alone as far as the general public would be concerned in that. No, Lhasa would be pretty much unknown to the masses, but she was by no means a minor deity in her own time and place. No, not by a long way. A goddess of the Etruscans in Italy from well before the rise of the Roman Empire, or even the Roman city-state for that matter, since, now, I find this quite interesting. The Etruscans actually founded the city of Rome. Well, I bet you didn't know that. Yes, you see, you learn things with me. And they turned, you see, what had been little more than, well, a collection of nondescript huts scattered across 7 hills into a great city that, unknown to them, of course, or they wouldn't have done it, would eventually throw off their rule and later conquer them, after which they and their gods would vanish from history. Poof, gone, just like that, swallowed by the behemoth of the Roman Republic, and later by the even more massive Roman Empire. Now, the moral of that story is, if you find a few rather naff huts on a hilltop, leave them alone, Ducky. Now, they're fine, just the way they are. You might not like them later on. The Etruscans, I think, are quite interesting. I mean, they obviously played a very big part in history. Well, I mean, they set the stage for the later Roman Empire, and that was a nice big chunk of history, I can tell you. And they occupied a region of Italy that roughly corresponds with Tuscany and parts of Lazio and Umbria, bounded by the Arno and Tiber rivers, the Apennine Mountains, and the Tyrrhenian Sea from around 1200 BC, well, according to Herodotus in the histories, and you ought to know, I mean, it was there, to their final assimilation into the expanding Roman domain around 264 BC. The Romans called them Tusci or Etrusci, from which derived the name of modern Tuscany. I bet you didn't know that either. See how I'm broadening your knowledge? Though they call themselves the Rasenna. The Greeks knew them as their Tyrrhenians from the sea they lived beside, obviously. Now, unfortunately, most of our knowledge about them comes from outside sources, Greek and Roman, since their language has been only partly deciphered. I mean, we can see it, which is lovely. Oh, yes, it looks lovely, but we can't read it, so really it might as well not be there at all. But I'm sure you're waiting with bated breath, champing at the bit, as they say, for me to get to the topic of this gripping episode. So, without further ado, no do's, let us talk about LASA. Now, LASA was a goddess of fate and destiny. Now, not the goddess of fate, no. That was Nortia. LASA was a sort of assistant goddess of fate, you might say. The generic meaning of her name would be spirit or nymph. And she was very closely associated with Turin, the goddess of love, vitality, and fertility. And there was a lot of fertility going on with the Etruscans, I can tell you, as we shall see when they went at it like rabbits. Now, LASA and Turin were frequently depicted together. Well, they were just good friends. But that could give the impression that she was merely an assistant, you see, a sidekick, if you like, of Turin, a divine Batman and Robin, so to speak. But that was not the case, not at all. She was also often shown on her own, a favourite representation being engraved on the back of a mirror. Oh, she pops up on mirrors all over the place. Or she's even used as a statuette to form the handle of a mirror, further proof that she was no mere servant to Turin. And the mirror is very significant, oh yes, as we shall come to in a moment. Nortia, the actual goddess of fate and chance, well, we know very little about her, since she is unattested in any of the surviving Etruscan texts that we can read, and we know about her only from Roman sources, where she gets a bit of a mention by the historian Livy, among others. We do know that Nortia had a rather curious attribute, which was a nail. Yes, a nail. And nails were driven into the walls of her temple during the Etruscan New Year festivals as a fertility rite. Well, strange fertility rite, it must be said, but when I can see the symbolism, yes, I can see it, the nail going, well, you get the picture. I'll draw a veil over that one. No! You could say she really nailed it. They must have had to replaster the walls of the temple after the festival was over. Anyway, enough about her. LASA was usually depicted as a beautiful woman with wings, naked, save for jewellery, such as a necklace and a bracelet, with boots, or soft slipper-like shoes, and often holding an alabastron, which is a Greek type of perfume vase associated with funerals and made of alabaster, hence the name. Its contents either used to anoint the dead or left as an offering. But this item, now, it had another use besides that of funeral rituals, since it was also used by the living. Women keeping their perfume in it, which along with mirrors ties in with the dual aspect of LASA's role in Etruscan religion, as we shall see, as does another symbol associated with it. Now, I find her nakedness with just jewelry or boots quite fascinating. Well, academically speaking, of course, because so-called glamour photographers taking photos for magazines like the ones, they keep on the top shelf so the underaged can't get their orbs on them, almost never used totally naked models. No, surprisingly, they would photograph them wearing a necklace or maybe a bracelet or wearing a belt and a pair of boots, just a shirt worn open and such like, because it seems that for some psychological reason a woman wearing almost nothing was much sexier than a woman wearing nothing at all. Well, or at least, so I'm told. I don't get it myself. No, I really don't. You see, I would have thought the opposite would be the case. The more you can see, well, the more... But apparently that's not the case. But you see, the interesting thing here is the Etruscans did exactly the same thing with LASA, a necklace or boots. So one must wonder, is that mere coincidence, or had they discovered the sensual aspect of necklaces and boots? I still find it a bit strange. I really don't. No! That woman is almost naked. Oh, look at those boots. Can't take my eyes off them. I mean, with a pair of boots like that, what else would one even notice? Yes. Now, she had a sort of sisterhood, lesser goddesses, known by the plural form of her name, the LASA. Today, I suppose we'd call them groupies. And like her, they were often depicted au naturel, with wings and carrying an alabastron or a mirror, and of course the gloves or necklace and all that super sexy stuff. They were regarded as a form of spiritual protectors, guardian angels, if you like, helping to guide the personal destiny of those they watched over, looking after them, and helping them along their way, giving them a little gentle push, you might say, from time to time, guiding them while they were alive and protecting their tomb after they were dead, which is awfully nice of them, really, wasn't it? There seems to have been nothing particularly forbidding or foreboding about the connection of LASA and the LASA with death, or indeed death itself, unlike the gloomy, Greek ideas on the subject, where the underworld, Hades, the same name as the god who ruled over it, it wasn't somewhere you really wanted to go to, not that, of course, you had a lot of choice, but a place of eternal joy and frolicking. Well, it wasn't by a very long way. And the Norse Hel, spelled with one L, and also named, of course, for the goddess who ruled over it. Well, no, not exactly a bad place to be. I mean, people doing pretty much what they did when they were alive, eating, drinking, having sex, and so on. It was probably a bit boring after a century or two. I mean, there's only so much hanky-panky howdy-father that you can do, especially if you've got all eternity to do it in. But the Norse Hel, of course, had nothing to do with punishment, as the later Christian version did, spelt with two L's. Oh no, where people were bathed in flames, writhing in lakes of sulphur and brimstone, and prodded with pitchforks by laughing demons. Ah, burn, baby, burn, frying tonight. Mustn't get carried away. Don't want to have one of my turns. All the symbols of LASA linked to the realm of the dead had a double meaning. Oh, the double ententes were flying. Both joyous and sorrowful, as we shall see in a moment. Life and death intertwined, as it were, indicating perhaps that to the Etruscans these were simply acceptable, albeit unavoidable, opposite of a whole, a sort of yin and yang, which I suppose today might be called the circle of life. Certainly, if we go by the superb murals found in the very elaborate Etruscan tombs, the afterlife wouldn't seem to be somewhere you'd be afraid of, and quite the contrary, in fact, since it seems to have started off with jolly family reunions. Oh, hello, nice to see you. We thought you'd never die. Well, I'd have been here sooner, but they came up with this new medicine. Put years on my life. Oh, well, you're here now. That's all that matters. Here, have a glass of wine. It's awfully good. Yes, and then they went on with everlasting music, dancing games, lots of food, and plenty of, shall we say, romantic activities. Yes. Maybe being a dead Etruscan, wasn't so bad. Well, definitely better than being a dead Greek in the doom and gloom of Hades, or a deceased bad Christian getting a pitchfork up the Khyber Pass. That would hurt. We know that Etruscan sports were pretty aggressive, to say the least, probably the forerunners of the later gladiatorial combats of the Roman Empire. And their romantic activities do seem to have been rather, frisky, to put it mildly. So their afterlife would probably have been a bit like the Maquis de Sade meets Attila the Hun. It certainly wouldn't have been boring by a long way. Like so much else about Etruscan belief, the alabastron also had a dual role. It could, as I've said, be used both for funeral rites and for holding a woman's perfume. The latter function, of course, being something that would most certainly be beneficial in romantic matters, especially in an age when odes of various less than pleasant kinds were pretty common. The pungent aromas of cesspits and open drains being passion killers, I can tell you. And in this context, the use of the alabastron ties in with LASA's closeness to the love goddess Turin, as does the frequency of her association with mirrors. Again, you see, we have the dual role. On one hand, a tool assisting in feminine beauty, well, male beauty, I suppose, for that matter, too. I mean, I have been known to look in one from time to time, and, well, never mind about that. And therefore, of course, very helpful in matters of the heart. And on the other hand, it was yet another symbol of death. Yes, no. Oh, what did a mirror have to do with shuffling off this mortal coil, you ask? Well, you see, the appearance of the spirits of the dead in mirrors was a widespread belief, even down to the present day, giving rise to the custom of covering mirrors after death. And that was still widely practiced in my grandmother's time. That's not very long ago. Someone went brown bread and sheets went over the mirrors. Well, it made sense, I suppose. I mean, you go into the bathroom and there's dead Uncle Fred staring back at you in the mirror. Well, it could put you right off what you went in there for. Or maybe make it happen a bit quicker than you wanted it to, which would be rather unfortunate, to put it mildly. Another frequent, and again, of course, double symbol associated with the goddess and her LASA was a wreath, which, of course, well, it could be a symbol of joy at weddings and festivals and an acknowledgement of great victory awarded to generals after a triumph in war, but it could also equally be associated with funerals and grave offerings. The duality of LASA's position, the relativity of fate to both life and death, seems quite obvious given this degree of symbolism. Subtle it was not, by a long way. So there we have LASA. Perhaps not as famous as Aphrodite or Athena, nor as dominant as the Morrigan, certainly, nor as influential in world affairs as Freya, but an interesting deity in her own right, especially in her role as a divine representative of things that could be both immensely joyous or profoundly tragic, depending on the twists and the turns of fate. Now, that idea, of course, it wasn't unique to LASA and the LASA. The Norni, or the Norns of the Norse people, also took a dual role in the way that they dealt with destiny of mortals as they carved their fate on sticks of wood. No, they didn't spin or weave it, ducky. Contrary to popular belief, they carved it. Also, contrary to popular belief, there were actually a considerable number of Nornir besides the three very famous ones, Urd, Verdandi, and Skuld, and they could be both good and downright unpleasant. Yes. See, now they would visit children at birth, and they would plan how their lives would unfold. And a child who was lucky enough to get a good Norn, oh well, that child was destined to live a long and happy, prosperous life. Joy and happiness would prevail. The sun would shine on them, the flowers would bloom, while those unfortunate enough to be visited by a gloomy, miserable Norn, one who wanted to make the child as depressed and miserable as she was herself, oh, well, hard luck. Yes, they really got the short stick, and they'd have a miserable, nasty life. Their crops would fail, the cat would die, their partner would run off with a chap from next door, and they would probably die young of some disgustingly awful malediction. The Greeks, of course, too, had the same concept with the three Morai, usually referred to as the Fates, who did spin one's fate. Yes, they spun it, which is where the incorrect idea for the Nornir came from later. And they were Clotho, the spinner. Now, she's the one who actually spun out your destiny. There was Lachesis, the allotter. She decided how long you were going to get. Yep. That's your time. Now the other one spins it out for you. And then Atropos, the inevitable one. Now she made sure you popped off at the allotted time by cutting your thread with her shears. No, you didn't even get an extra minute with her around. Talk about getting the snip. With that, we end this look at LASA and her semi-naked, mirror-waving, glove-wearing groupies. I hope you enjoyed it. And until next time, I shall say goodbye. Goodbye for now.